Well, welcome everybody to the Church Facilities Expo podcast, better known as CFX. My name is Tyler Reagin. I'm the host today. This podcast is part of a series of conversations with industry leaders focused on inspiration, connection, education, and growth for houses of worship, building towards the first annual Church Facilities Conference and Expo in Dallas this September 29th to October 1st. And today we have a very special guest. It's a friend of mine. We've partnered together for years, but we're just getting to know each other even more. Joel Guthrie is with us today. So Joel, tell us a little bit about who you are. Give us a little background on who you are, and specifically tell us how you got to Blackbaud where you are now.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for letting me be a part of this and a part of the event this fall. I'm super excited to speak and kind of pour into these leaders while we're there. I grew up in church. Family helped start a couple churches in the Colorado Springs area. Was a worship leader for quite some time after college, studied music, and now I'm in marketing like everybody else with a fine arts degree. And I've worked with a couple other technology companies in the space, growing up in the Seattle area after college and in high school and all that kind of stuff. Got to be around just such a tech central place. So had the ability to serve companies like Amazon and Microsoft and Google from a marketing standpoint. And then after that, jumped into church tech. I worked for a couple of giving solutions and now have made my way to Blackbaud. And Blackbaud's a really cool company to work for. I've been there almost 2 years now. And I get the really cool job of being a resource. So I run all of the thought leadership for Blackbaud's faith division. So we serve churches and faith-based nonprofits. But I love my job is I don't have to sell anything. My job is just to be the best resource, connect with leaders like you, Tyler, to provide the most effective content to help them lead their churches and grow their churches.
Yeah. We were talking, Joel, earlier because we're in unprecedented times right now. It's such an interesting season that none of us have a template for. And it's interesting. I was telling you a little bit about this new book that I just am finishing up. But one of the things I learned as I was writing about it is that there's a big difference between being idle and being patient. And I think in this time, there's a lot of churches that are just going, you know what, we're just pausing until we get through this. And that's a pretty natural instinct. But I think there's a lot that are seeing it as the opposite, as a catalyst, as an opportunity to kind of catapult and grow. So talk to me a little bit about the difference you see in being idle and really seeing a season like this, even though there's a lot of pausing, and using this as a season of growth.
I think that's a great question. I think there's a lot of communications pastors and online pastors out there that are loving this because they're getting to launch all of these cool solutions and softwares and be like, see, we needed to do this. And I think it's such a cool opportunity for us as church leaders to take advantage of the technology that we have at our disposal, and not even paid stuff, but social media, your website, YouTube. I mean, there's never been a better time to serve the global church and then right now. If this happened to us 10 years ago, we wouldn't be able to do all of these amazing things that we can do now to reach churches at home and have people meeting in their homes regularly and engaging back with you at your church. Like, it's just never been better. And I think that's just kind of the view we got to look at instead of just kind of finding a Band-Aid until we can go back to Sunday. I don't think this is an either or conversation. It's an and. After all this is over, everything you've invested into this online experience, this digital experience for Sunday, is only going to help you grow your church more moving forward and get more people through the door of your church eventually.
Well, one of the things you guys are experts at is engaging with people. And you kind of hinted on that, but I want to dive a little deeper into it. Like, what are some unique ways that churches maybe that are even just barely stepping into this technology space, what are a couple of unique ways that you see people should engage or should connect with their audience in a different way?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that, first of all, everybody has grace right now. Everyone in your congregation is going to let you figure this out. And if it doesn't work one week and you change the next week, no one's going to be like, man, what are you doing? Like, we all have grace because everyone's trying to figure this out right now.
Right.
So it's such an awesome opportunity to try things that are unique to your church. We don't have to look at all of the mega churches and be like, man, they're still doing multicam, huge production, like pre-recorded service look. And we have a small church of 200 people, and I have an iPhone. Like, you don't have to look like that. You can be super personable. So first of all, I just say try things, like do things that are unique to your church. And then some of the coolest things that I've seen is the way churches are embracing the midweek. So in between your
Mm-hmm.
Sunday service that you've done is the really unique ways from, I mean, some of my buddies at Crosspoint Church here in Nashville are doing coffee in quarantine, where they just get on Instagram Live and have a cup of coffee, and they interview somebody else on staff who joins the live stream, and they answer questions, and it's 15 to 20 minutes, but it's a couple times a week. There's the online worship services that are live streamed or pre-recorded. It's finding innovative ways that people are going around and serving their congregation. I have a friend in Seattle who his youth pastor for Easter is going around and like tossing Easter candy to the youth kids at their house, like staying at an appropriate distance, but like tossing them candy just to check in, say hi. I think it's just such a cool time to try new things and be unique, because every church is
Yep.
unique. What you're good at, what your congregation, what your community is going through is so unique, and only you can speak into that.
Yeah. And it doesn't, it's these seasons that create some serious innovation too, like for growth. I just watched a video. Maybe I'm late to the party, but John Krasinski, who was on The Office, and he's married to, is it Emily Blunt? I think it is, who was Mary Poppins Returns. Anyway, he's doing a whole series right now on some good news. I think it's what's called SGN, good news,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just, he's finding all these really cool ways to show the good in these seasons. And then in the same way, you're seeing churches get really creative. I watched Steph Curry do this thing with his wife, and it was like a 2-hour thing where they were just in their home, and they were inviting famous worship leaders to sing a song on their Instagram Live. So he's
Yeah,
using this platform of 20 million people and expose it, and that you watch their family just worship together. And I think it's just one of the most innovative, unique seasons that we've ever walked through.
I mean, it's so cool to even watch. If you pay attention, like if y'all watch late night, like Jimmy Fallon, they're recording late night TV on their phones and Zoom recorded calls.
It's
A
insane.
like one of the largest TV shows, largest viewed TV shows, has gone all the way down to an iPhone and Zoom recorded calls to continue to deliver content remotely and digitally. It's everybody's
Yeah.
having to adjust. It's not just churches,
Yeah.
and that there's so much freedom in that, and our ability to innovate.
Yeah. So let's try, Joel, with the best of our ability, to back out of this season and get into what we call normal life, right? Let's say we're back into we can gather as a church, we can do some things, but what are some of the challenges that churches face in general? And you can tie it to the season if you want, but when it comes to growing, like what have you seen? Houses of worship, what is that? What are some of those obstacles they have, and then what's maybe one or two ways to avoid them?
Yeah, that's a great question, and there's a multitude of reasons behind why churches aren't growing and things like that. It's I've had some interesting conversations with a couple pastors about just a cultural shift and change of the way people go to church and view church. But I think the biggest ones is generational change, so adjusting to the next generation. Not even millennials now. We've got Gen Z up to bat, and the way they want to be engaged and what matters to them. And then also just kind of the embracing of technology. People go to church, was it 3 out of every 8 Sundays,
Yeah.
statistically. So how are you engaging them when they're not there? Those people consider themselves active members of your church, and they're only there 3 out of every 8 Sundays. Those are like regular committed people, statistically, in your church. So how are you keeping them involved and keeping them engaged? And that's where technology plays that role. But yeah, I think the solution is just this embrace of technology, and this time right now is letting you guys dabble in it, letting you guys figure it out, and with a lot of grace around it, to take what works at the end of this to continue to reach and grow your church, moving forward through engaging your community. Tyler, you and I were talking about before this call of just, it's never been a better time for people to check out your church. The
Yep.
burden of the front door is not there anymore. The front door to your church is your website nowadays. So it's being able to be like, without any anxiety around being in a room and not knowing what's going on, you can turn it on and turn it off when you want to. And then that'll really lead to people coming through your front door if they connect with you digitally through your message. It's so huge. So I think it's just the value of embracing social media and technology
Yeah.
and things like that to engage your community. And secondly, it sounds really simple and kind of silly, is just be authentic to who you are as a church. I think the negative side to this digital world is we, not just in the church side, but personally in individuals' lives, we're constantly comparing ourselves to somebody else down the road on the other side of the world, or the church down the street, or the mega church in our area of the world or the country. Like, man, we don't look like that. But people, because of digital, if they wanted to go to the church, they would go to that church. They're at your church because of the
Right.
unique things that make your church yours, what you're good at. Maybe it's your kids program, maybe it's the demographic of, you've just got a really diverse group, or the way you teach. Like, embrace the authenticity of who you are as a church. And even that tied to the next generation with Gen Z, that's the number one thing they look for in anything, is authenticity. They want something
Yep.
real. They're the filter generation. They're the fake apps, and where you can be somebody else. Like, they want a real connection and want truth, which is a really interesting pivot as a church that we've had to make. But they just want you to be authentically real and be you and be human. So I think it's a super simple concept, but just be authentic, be who you are, who your church is.
That's great. So let's just, we all know this, that a, a large majority of churches in the U.S. Are probably 500 or less, or 300 or less. So if somebody's listening and they're like, yeah, that's great, Joel, and a lot of these big churches can do this, but let's say they just took over a church of 200, and they want to introduce one or two pieces of technology, really to start trying to move their church in a little bit of a different direction. What are the one or two things that you guys would recommend and say, this is the starting part? And I mean, like, let's get super nuts and bolts basic on it. What are the two things that you go, you got to have this and you got to have this?
Yeah, I think so. I would start. So the backbone of all of the things that happen in your church come back to your database, your church management solution, which is the backbone of all of the information from all your church members or congregants, from their family journeys to their giving history to the financial point of who you are as a church. I think that's super crucial, that you really vet that vendor, not just
Joel,
because I
let me
work for.
pause that, because that is 100% true. And I think so many people don't even think about the importance of that. But in a time like this, where you have to communicate to your church, and if you didn't have this data, you have completely missed this opportunity. And I know this, for leaders like me, you're like, what? Data? Really? That's what we need? Like, I'm just so glad you said that, because I think so many churches have to pay attention to that.
Yeah, I mean, we can do a whole episode on just how awesome data and how much data you have access to in the world right now as a
Right.
church leader, and how you can use it to engage your church. That's a whole other episode, and I get really nerdy really fast, and I apologize. But yeah, I think, your backbone, that piece is not only just the piece to implement first, but the piece to invest in. I think a lot of churches, I mean, as pastors and church leaders, most of us don't come from a tech background, don't know how to evaluate technology. It's not a normal thing for us. We know how to lead a church. We know how to share the gospel. We know to love on people. But when it comes to evaluating the capabilities of your database, which is a snooze fest to some people, I
Right.
love it because it's nerdy, but it's such a crucial piece to not just have to invest in and use, but something to think about. Okay, if you want your church to grow, will this solution grow with you, or is this just a band-aid for right now to get you through?
Yeah.
That's a big thing I always try to talk to church leaders about, is just invest in that piece first, so that you can have something that goes with you. Because changing databases down the road, Tyler, as you know, as being on a church staff, like, that's brutal. It's a brutal process. So, and doing the due diligence up front is huge.
Yep.
But the second piece that I would engage, like, truly encourage you to invest in, is a good website.
Yep.
Either pay somebody to build it on your own. Like, having, like we mentioned earlier, your website's your digital front door. Nobody goes anywhere without checking online anymore. Like,
Yep.
especially as a millennial, my generation, I won't go get food. I won't go to Home Depot. I won't go anywhere until I'm super sure they have exactly what I need and it looks like what they said it's going to look like. And so having a great website that's not only clear and concise, but you want to make sure it's mobily optimized, that it works on a phone. Over 80% of people do all of their web browsing on a cell phone. So I would always lean that way first. And then the other piece that I think is super crucial, that some churches do it, not every church I've seen does it, but a what to expect page. Put it in your top navigation.
That's great.
For those of you who's never been to your church, walking into church, especially if you didn't grow up in church, it's a weird process. It's a weird experience. We do weird things. We eat bread and drink wine and say it's the body and the blood. If you don't know the story and the why, that's weird. We stand up and we sing and we sit back down and we pray. Like, some churches, people dress really nice for church and it's a 2-hour service, or it's super casual. So I think setting as many expectations up front on your website will just help people be more and more comfortable to come through the front door on an actual Sunday service at the end of all this.
Yeah, that's great, Joel. And again, I'd be excited to have Joel. Joel's going to be with us at CFX 2020 in Dallas in September. And he's going to have a whole lot more to offer and talk about and hear a lot of the new stuff that he's got going on. Joel, where can people learn a little bit more about you and what's going on with you at Blackbaud?
Yeah, Instagram is the best place to engage me. I'm a millennial. See lots of pictures of my dog. It's just at Joel Guthrie, my first and last name. Happy to answer questions and engage you there. And then for the stuff we're working on at Blackbaud and the resources we're continuing to produce, faith.blackbaud.com is a great resource. It's where everything goes first. We're also on some of the social handles as well, but that's the best place to engage us at first.
It's awesome. Thanks for joining us today, Joel. And if you listen to this podcast, you like podcasts, please listen to the additional ones we're creating, read our newsletters, and learn more about CFX at churchfacilitiesexpo.com. My name's Tyler Reagin, and thank you for joining us. We hope to see you at CFX 2020 in Dallas this September 29th to October 1st. Thanks for being with us, Joel.
Thanks for having me.